In one of my previous videos, I talked about adding books to my game using an asset called Endless Books. So, in order to do that, I still have to create all the content, and I made a little example of what it might look like. And the way I did this is I made a TextMesh Pro object and put it on the page so that the camera would render that text onto the page. But does that mean I have to make another TextMesh object for every single page, every single book? That sounds like it would take a really long time. So it's the perfect sort of thing that you can write a script to do and have it done automatically. But even that sounds kind of tedious, so I don't know. What if I could get somebody else to do it for me, for free? Well, a real programmer is never gonna go for that, but $0 is enough to hire a fake person. An electronic being designed to serve mankind. Of course, I'm referring to ChatGPT, the latest craze in the software development community. Except the real website won't let me sign up for some reason. So instead, I'm going to be using the Bing version. Sorry, Microsoft Bing. So I tell it I need a Unity script that will take a string and break it up into TextMesh Pro objects of a certain height and width. And that string is, of course, the text of the book. Okay, that's not much to go on at all, but if you can believe it, the AI quickly came up with a full listing and instructions on how to use it. But is it actually any good? That's the question. I mean, it looks very reasonable at first glance. It's splitting my text up into separate words and looping through them. It's querying the TextMesh Pro object, trying to find information about its height and width. So, all of the things that I would do if I were writing this sort of code. So I copy and paste it into my IDE. And let's see. I notice right away we have some errors, but there's a very simple explanation, and it's because we're missing using directives at the top. So that means that the compiler can't identify which particular objects that we're referring to in some cases. I wouldn't really consider that a mistake because these are such basic boilerplate things that when you give somebody a code listing, you don't necessarily include that. So most of the errors go away when I add the standard, using Unity Engine and using TextMesh Pro. We still have one error though. There's a character input object and character info, and there's a property called width, and it's saying that there's no property called with that name. So now I'm looking at the official Unity documentation for the TextMesh Pro character info object, and wow, this documentation is really, really bad. All it has are the member names and what type they are. It doesn't say anything about what they do and what they represent. And sure enough, there is no width property. I guess ChatGPT just made that up, or maybe somebody wrote an extension method out there somewhere and it saw that listing and thought that there was a width. But we can fake a width by taking the locations of the corners and subtracting one from the other. So if you subtract the right corner from the left corner, you can get a number in between there. So we will make our own width. That's fine. We can do that. Although I'm starting to notice other problems in the code. For example, we're checking the width of the TextMesh Pro, but we haven't assigned it any value yet. So that doesn't make any sense. because right now the text mesh pro object is going to be empty. We want to know what size it's going to be, but we can't just check what size it is now because we haven't assigned it any text yet. The other problem I'm noticing is that we're checking the width. If the width is too wide, it'll add a new line. That makes sense. But what about the height? It's not actually checking the height anywhere. So when our text mesh overflows, it's not going to split it up into a new text mesh. It's just going to overflow. So as is, this code just isn't going to work at all. So I'm sorry to say this, everyone, but Pinocchio is broken. His strings have been cut. But maybe not so fast. Hold on a minute. ChatGPT is supposed to store context. It's supposed to remember the last thing you typed in so that it can carry out a coherent conversation. So maybe we can ask it to correct its own code. We'll see how that works. So I come back and I ask it a question. I say info.characterCount will always be 0 because we don't assign a value to text mesh pro.text until the end of the script. Wait, until the end, till later. Okay, let's just say later. Then it says, oh, I apologize, you're right. Here's the corrected script. Okay, now it's writing another script. Alright, well, you're on a roll, ChatGPT. I might as well ask you another pressing question, which is core to the problem here. What about the height? We need to create I don't know, additional text mesh pro making sure I spelled that right. Objects if the height is exceeded. Yeah, what do you gotta say about that? Alright, right again. And it wrote another script. Alright, I don't know. Maybe that's probably still has errors, but it's probably close enough to work with now. Let's try it out. So let's go back into our script and replace the old code with the new code and see if it works better. So it's still suffering under the delusion that there's such a thing as characterinfo.width, but we already have a workaround for that. There's still a lot of fundamental problems with this code. For example, even though ChatGPT made the correction of assigning a text value to the text mesh pro as it's working instead of just at the end of the script like it was before, that still doesn't help because in actuality Unity does not generate the text mesh pro until the rendering phase or I don't know if that's true actually, later in the frame, let's say. So the actual height and width and character count don't change until the next frame, so I have to add a yield statement to delay the execution of the remainder of the code until after the frame. Some of the ways it's calculating the height and width are just plain wrong too. For example, to predict the height of the next line, it's taking the current height, which makes sense, but it's adding the font size, which doesn't make any sense at all. I mean, obviously, when you wrap around a line, it's going to increase the height by the height of one line, but the font size has nothing to do with that. It's just nonsensical. You know what this reminds me of? It's kind of like when you see one of those AI-generated images, and it looks perfectly normal at first, and then when you look at it a little more closely, you start to notice weird things, like what's up with this guy's hand? Why does this guy have two noses? And, what is this? Oh no. Oh, I don't like that at all. And that's the same way I see this generated code. It looks okay at first, but then when you start to look closely at the details, you start to notice things are just kind of screwed up and nonsensical. To be fair, though, I did ask it to do something that's not trivial, and also, I mean, it's really amazing that a computer came up with anything at all. I mean, just last year, such a thing was impossible. So you can only imagine that things are going to improve from now on, that this is going to keep growing and get better